2019, then CEO Yossi Carmel boasted that Cellebrite controlled all products remotely. Now, that could be seen as an admission about access to data, but I accept it's not entirely clear what he meant. As a lawyer, I'm evidence-based, and I try to avoid unfounded speculation. Having said that, and just based on what we've spoken about until now, I don't think it's some far-fetched conspiracy theory to think that Cellebrite may be able to access the data that's being extracted from people's phones using its products. I mean, let's not forget that we're talking about a company that is made up of elite Israeli army intelligence veterans, and it still has very close ties with the Israeli military. So if any company has the know-how and the motive to collect the data, it's Cellebrite. But let's look at the evidence. Specifically, I'm going to talk about two documents that are highly revealing, but, as far as I'm aware, have never been reported on. The documents are contracts between Cellebrite and Services Australia. One is a license agreement for the use of Cellebrite products, and the other is a contract for services provided by Cellebrite. I can confirm that they're both authentic because I obtained them myself directly from Services Australia last month. Both of the contracts contain some really disconcerting clauses that I was genuinely shocked to see, like the clause that requires Services Australia to provide Cellebrite with its internal IT policy, or the clause designed to stop Service Australia's employees from telling Australian police about what Cellebrite can do. But for today's purposes, I'm just going to focus on the clauses relevant to this question of access to data. Under the license agreement, Services Australia authorises Cellebrite to, in certain circumstances, access all devices, data and media contained on them, obtain and retain personal data on the devices, and access and intercept communications on the devices. The services agreement goes even further, authorising Cellebrite to access or modify any data on any device it is providing services for, as well as collecting, recording, disclosing and transferring personal information on the device. The services are defined in the contract to include unlocking and extraction of devices and then searching and processing the data contained in them. So these contracts provide clear evidence that, at least in some situations, Cellebrite can access the data that's being downloaded from our phones. How often this is occurring, we don't know, and we can't find out due to the complete lack of transparency. Now, the contracts I've just spoken about are only with Services Australia. So you might be asking, are there similar clauses in Cellebrite's contract with other agencies? Well, from the research I've carried out, the answer seems to be yes. Although it's not easy to find, Cellebrite's current license agreement is available on its website. The agreement is almost identical to the one with Services Australia, and crucially, it includes the same clause authorising Cellebrite to access data held by customers. The only other Cellebrite license agreement I've been able to locate online is that from the Gilbert Police Department in Arizona, USA. It was buried at the back of some council minutes, and so I'm not sure if many people have even seen it before. Here you can see the same clause authorising Cellebrite's access to customer data in certain circumstances. So that's Cellebrite's license agreement, but what about its contract for services? Well, there doesn't appear to be any copies of it publicly available, but I'd be surprised if the one I've obtained from Services Australia is not standard. From the way the contract is drafted, it appears to be generic. And also, most tech companies generally use the same contract with all customers to ensure consistency. Another troubling piece of this puzzle is that we don't know where government agencies store the data they download from our phones. Now, I know from experience that police in this country have traditionally saved their data on computers and hard drives at the station. However, Cellebrite is slowly but surely transitioning its products to the cloud, and some products now operate exclusively on the cloud. Here's a promo video from last September for Cellebrite's Pathfinder product, encouraging customers to use the product and host its data on the cloud instead of on local servers.
Deploying in the cloud allows your agency to invest more time, money, and resources into fulfilling your core mission.
Now, it's important to bear in mind that Pathfinder analyzes the data downloaded using all Cellebrite products. So presumably, by using Pathfinder on the cloud, the agencies are uploading all of the data they've extracted from our phones and devices onto the cloud. Now, this begs the question, why is Cellebrite trying to get government agencies to store all of this data on the cloud? Can Cellebrite access it more easily if it's on the cloud? Well, you won't find much information about this in the public domain, but I was able to locate this recent promo video from Cellebrite, where the spokesperson described what happens once data is remotely extracted from a phone or other device using Endpoint Inspector.
Once that collection completes, that's the UFD file, and that's that full kind of forensic image, and that's going to go to Cellebrite, where we're going to actually parse out that data. So it is going to come to Cellebrite, parse it into the UFDR, convert it, the messaging to the RSMF, and then we're going to transfer it over to Relativity One in the workspace that was set up during the job collection.
Now, she goes on in the video to claim that Cellebrite deletes all the data once it's been processed for the customer. But how do we know if this is true? It's worth mentioning that the cloud that Cellebrite uses is the Amazon Web Services, or AWS cloud. This raises concerns of its own because, like Cellebrite, AWS has close ties to the Israeli military. Specifically, AWS provides computing services, AI and other services to the Israeli military under a $1.2 billion contract known as Project Nimbus. Now, I want to make clear that I'm not positively alleging that Cellebrite can access all of the data that's being downloaded from our phones using its products. There's simply not enough evidence for me to make that claim. But I am saying that there's a real risk that they might be doing this, and in my opinion, that's not a risk worth taking. Okay, so now that I've just set out a very long list of concerns about Cellebrite and its use in Australia, I want to end with two main recommendations. The first is that the federal and state governments reconsider their relationship with Cellebrite altogether. Now, there's no shortage of reasons why they should drop Cellebrite. From a moral standpoint, it's a no-brainer. Cellebrite has close ties with the Israeli army, which uses its surveillance products to further its brutal and illegal occupation of the West Bank. And although the details aren't clear, we also know that Cellebrite has assisted the Israeli military while they carry out what is now widely considered to be a genocide in Gaza. On top of that, Cellebrite has a track record of selling its products to repressive regimes which have used them against journalists, dissidents, and activists. Now, maybe you don't care so much about arguments based on morals or human rights, and you only care about what's in Australia's best interests. Well, there's still a really compelling reason to ditch Cellebrite, and that's security. As I've explained in this video, there are really good reasons not to trust Cellebrite with our data. At the end of the day, it's a foreign intelligence company made up of former spies from an intelligence unit of a foreign state to which it still appears to have close ties. And I should add that Israel is not just any foreign state, but one with a long history of spying on its allies. Indeed, Israel's even been credibly accused of having previously spied in Australia. Cellebrite has the means and the motive to access our data, and it seems that it may already be doing this in some cases. It goes without saying that the protection of the personal data of Australian citizens should be a priority of our elected government and the law enforcement agencies in this country. And it's not like our government doesn't have any other options. Although I haven't covered them in this video, there are other companies that offer similar products to Cellebrite, like Magnet Forensics, MSAB, and Xtero. In fact, the Department of Home Affairs, which is what the Australian Border Force is a part of, recently switched from Cellebrite to Magnet Forensics. Now, I'm not saying these competitors are perfect, far from it, but they don't give rise to the same level of human rights and security concerns that Cellebrite does. My second recommendation is that the federal and state governments should enact legislation regulating the use of phone extraction products, whether or not it's with Cellebrite. The legislation will need to differ depending on the agency, but the key principles will be the same. For the police, some of the main provisions should include the following. 1. There should be a ban on the police downloading our phones unless they've got a warrant. If there's a legitimate forensic need for the cops to get access to a phone, then they can explain that to a judge in the same way they would have to if they wanted to search your home or tap your phone. 2. The police should only be able to apply for warrants when they're investigating serious criminal offences, and not minor ones. 3. The police should only be permitted to download and review data that is likely to be relevant to their investigation, and not the entire phone's content. 4. The police should only be able to store the data for as long as is necessary for the investigation or prosecution. And if no charges are laid or the defendant is found not guilty, the data should be deleted. And lastly, 5. Each year, the police should be required to disclose the extent and effectiveness of the use of these products, and there should be independent auditing. Ultimately, this is one of the only ways to ensure that this highly intrusive technology is not being abused. Okay, so that brings me to the end of the first episode of the What and the Why. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and leave a comment to help boost it in the algorithm.